when I had left the Sea Organization, within a couple months, I was, being persecuted in various ways by the church. And so that kind of drove me to seek out answers as to what was going on. Why was the church doing this? And I knew that there were answers on the internet. I just hadn't really gone into looking at them in depth. When I was still in the church and still in the Sea Organization, I glossed over some of that, but I hadn't gotten into it too much. I thought, for example, that Tony Ortega was the biggest jerk on the planet because he was always bad-mouthing Scientology. But I came to learn that he's actually a really great guy. So and he and I get along great now, but at the time I thought he was a total jerk. So anyway, I knew that there was information out there, in other words, but I wasn't reading it. And when things started going sour with the church and me, I went and started looking into that stuff. And I went, as they call it, down the rabbit hole. And that took me months. It was a weeks and weeks long process of discovery, finding out all this information about, things that had been going on in the Sea Organization and in Scientology for decades, finding out all about Operation Snow White, finding out all about and seeing Hubbard's directives and issues and policies that were confidential inside the church, but they're all over the internet. So I was seeing these things, many of them for the first time, and and I could definitely recognize Hubbard's writing. And so it was shocking to me that he was telling and advising and directing that people's lives be ruined if they were critics of the church. I had no idea. I had no idea that Operation Snow White had occurred and it had been as extensive as it was. I had no idea about Hubbard himself. I started diving into that. That was one of the last things I wanted to accept, because Hubbard, and when you're a Scientologist, L. Ron Hubbard he's a guru. He's God. He's source. He is the man. He's infallible. He's a guy who never gets it wrong. And so to find out that his school records were a lie, his university records were a lie, his war record was a lie, that he had numerous wives, kids, all of this was brand new information to me, and it was shocking information. It turned my whole world upside down, and I really did feel like I was falling down a rabbit hole, just like Alice in Wonderland at that point. That was how I felt in my head. And I realized the point of the biggest betrayal for me was when I got all that information, looked at the OT levels, read those, knew that at that point I'd gone past the point of no return. There was no going back after that. Found out what crap they were, like how illogical, they didn't make any sense, they didn't fit in with the rest of Scientology as far as I was concerned, and they were just ridiculous. I had never seen any of that when I was in Scientology because I hadn't made it to the OT levels. So all of that combined started forming this picture in my head that I had been part of a con on all of these public that I'd been servicing and thinking I was helping for all these years. And I started really seeing it, everything started lining up, that this was a money-making operation only. Like, that's all it was doing. And everything else was window dressing. And that was, when you give a better part of your life to an organization and to a movement that you feel and are told over and over and over again, very heavily indoctrinated into the idea that you are saving the world. And then you find out that that's not what you've been doing at all. That is the word shock, betrayal, awe. These words don't really, describe how I felt about it. I've never felt such a sense of betrayal before. I never felt so taken advantage of. And I never felt like my life was such a fake, and it was not fun. It was not pleasant to get that, to go through that experience. So, so after that was done, and that's what drove me to start posting on the internet, because the depth of my anger was so great. I had such an anger reaction to it and a betrayal. I had to vent. I had to get something out. I had to talk to somebody. And there wasn't really anybody in my vicinity at that time that I could talk to in person about this. I couldn't. So that's why I started, venting online, and not under my own name. I used an assumed name. I went on to the ex-Scientology message board, and I came up with the name I Hate Duplicity. That was my name. I Hate Duplicity. And I started posting and venting, and Hubbard and Miscavige and Steer, rah rah rah. And anyway, one thing led to another, and a few months later, about 8 months later, I was declared and out. And a couple months after that is when I started doing videos, did my first interview, and the rest is history. So